1770, outside Bristol, England. Rain pounds the road as John Wesley rides through the night, Bible wrapped under his cloak. The lantern by his saddle swings in the wind, throwing quick flashes across muddy fields and stone cottages. Behind him, the voices of a few dozen working men still echo with hymns, and ahead of him, another village waits, cold, dark, and hungry for the hope that he can deliver. England is changing. Factories hum through the dusk, and taverns stay warm while churches grow empty. But in barns and fields and back rooms, people are gathering, not for show, but for Scripture and for prayer and for song. Wesley presses on. He isn't chasing fame or argument. He's following a burden that won't let him stop, to reach people that the church no longer sees. And if the church doors stay closed, he thinks, where will people go? And if revival keeps spreading, who will help guide it? From the That's Jesus channel, welcome to Coach, where church origins and church history actually coach us how to walk boldly with Jesus today. I'm Bob Balch, and on Fridays, we stay between 1500 and 2000 AD. In this episode, we travel to the year 1770 to an England alive with revival and debate. John Wesley rode through rain and ridicule to form societies of ordinary believers who prayed and confessed and served together. He sought not fame or schism, but shared holiness that transformed lives. Their small groups, called class meetings, became the heartbeat of Methodism and a model still challenging the church today. John Wesley never planned to start a movement. He was an Anglican priest who wanted renewal, not rebellion. Yet by 1770, his disciplined societies had become the most dynamic spiritual force in Britain. 18th century England was restless. The Industrial Revolution was reshaping cities, and poverty was spreading, and the Church of England often seemed distant from everyday life. Worship could feel formal, sermons dry, the parish walls too narrow for the questions that ordinary people carried. Wesley saw it firsthand as he rode from town to town, preaching in fields when pulpits closed their doors to him. His message was simple but unsettling. God's grace is free for all, and holiness is for every believer, not just a devout few. The people listened: miners, merchants, servants, mothers. They organized into societies for teaching and prayer, then into smaller classes of about 12 members. And there they confessed their sins, they read Scripture, they gave to the poor, and they asked one another hard questions like, "How is it with your soul?" Attendance required commitment. Members received tickets each quarter, renewed only if they stayed active in faith and conduct. The purpose wasn't control, it was care. Wesley believed that believers needed both mercy and method, grace and guidance. The system worked. Revival spread, and the societies multiplied faster than any parish could manage. Yet success brought tension. Lay preachers spoke where clergy disapproved. Women testified freely, and in some cases, women even preached. Critics warned that Wesley was creating a church within the church. By 1770, Methodism had reached a turning point. It was organized, powerful, and controversial, a movement alive with grace, but shadowed by conflict. The question was no longer whether God was moving, but whether the established church would make room for what he was doing. "The world is my parish," Wesley said. The success of Wesley's movement made him both admired and accused. To the poor and the working class, he was a shepherd. To many Anglican clergy, he was a problem. Wesley's lay preachers stirred the anger of bishops who saw unauthorized preaching as defiance. Some parish leaders refused him their pulpits altogether, and when Wesley preached outdoors, mobs sometimes answered with stones or livestock. The horse became both pulpit and sanctuary as he rode through storms and hostility. Women increasingly exhorted and, in select cases, preached. Regular authorization followed in the early 1770s, notably through Mary Bosanquet's advocacy and example. But the greater battle wasn't physical, it was theological. Wesley's sermons leaned Arminian. Salvation offered to all, grace is resistible, and holiness is attainable. The Anglican establishment leaned Calvinist, where grace was limited, where election was certain, and salvation was secure. Wesley's insistence that believers could fall from grace enraged critics who claimed that he made salvation depend on human will. Pamphlets flew across London. Some accused him of heresy, others accused him of pride. Wesley pushed back with Scripture, quote, "The grace of God is free in all and free for all," end quote. For him, holiness was not earned, it was evidence of a heart that was transformed by grace. And that transformation, he believed, required accountability. So he doubled down on his societies and class meetings, those weekly circles of confession, prayer, and renewal. Still, the tension deepened. The Church of England called his movement disorderly. The common people called it alive. Lay preachers traveled from village to village, women led prayers, and workers preached between shifts. The revival spread faster than the church could contain. By the late 1760s, Methodism had become too large to ignore and too independent to control. And in 1770, the annual Methodist Conference gathered to face the unavoidable question: could this disciplined revival remain under Anglican authority, or had it already become something new? The 1770 Methodist Conference. It was meant to be routine, a yearly gathering of preachers and society leaders, and instead, it became a storm. The question dividing the room was simple but explosive. What does it mean to be saved? Some insisted that true believers could never fall away, that salvation was fixed by decree. Wesley stood, his voice steady but burning, and he said this, quote, "Whoever is not holy on earth will never be holy in heaven," end quote. Holiness, he declared, was not a side effect of grace, it was proof of grace. Grace that produced no transformation was not grace at all. The room bristled at those words. Calvinist Methodists accused him of preaching works-based righteousness. The pamphlets flew, the pulpits thundered, and friendships strained. Even George Whitefield kept his distance, but Wesley would not retreat. He tightened the discipline. Class leaders renewed their weekly visits, asking each member, "How is it with your soul?" He believed that structure, not emotion, would preserve revival after the crowds dispersed. The cost was painful. Some societies fractured. The critics mocked that the Methodists were zealots chasing perfection. Yet the movement endured. Across Britain, miners and merchants still gathered, singing, studying, and serving, undaunted by the scorn. In 1771, Francis Asbury answered Wesley's call to carry those same methods across the Atlantic, from the docks of Bristol to the fields of Maryland. He rode the circuit with Wesley's discipline in his saddlebag. By the turn of the 19th century, those class meetings had crossed oceans and languages, reaching frontiers, prisons, and schools. And Wesley's insistence on accountability and grace had birthed a worldwide movement that refused to die. Quote, "Give me 100 preachers who fear nothing but sin and desire nothing but God, and such alone will shake the gates of hell." End quote. The revival had survived its trial, and it had multiplied. But as Methodism became a church in its own right, one question refused to fade. Would structure still serve the Spirit, or would the Spirit one day have to rescue his people from the structure? Systems still fill our churches, but not always filling them with life. Across the world, millions of people gather weekly in small groups and Bible studies and recovery circles and mentoring teams, shaped, often unknowingly, by Wesley's design. The pattern endures because it works. Accountability breeds growth, and shared holiness becomes witness. Yet the danger endures too. When attendance replaces transformation, the method becomes its own religion. Today's believers face Wesley's same crossroads. Programs can preserve faith, or programs can suffocate the faith. Checklists can train disciples, and checklists might merely count them. The question is never whether the church will be organized, it's whether its organization still carries fire. Revival that lasts must live in rhythm, truth with love, freedom with form, passion with perseverance. Accountability, rightly held, becomes grace made visible, a living fellowship that resists both chaos and control. And the world still needs holy communities that prove that grace works in real life. And the church still needs courage to keep the structure serving the Spirit, not the other way around. So what about us? Wesley believed that holiness was never meant to be private, and neither was growth. His class meetings were small enough for honesty and close enough for confession and strong enough for change. And each week, the believers asked, "How is it with your soul?" And they refused to let one another drift. That same question still echoes across the centuries for us. Would you let someone ask you that today? Would you open your life to genuine accountability, to prayer that gets under the surface, to friendships that don't let faith fade in comfort or distraction? We all crave belonging, but discipleship costs transparency. Revival doesn't start with crowds, it starts with small circles. And maybe for you, that circle looks like a Bible study or a home group or a recovery ministry. I don't know. Maybe it's one trusted friend, just one who keeps you anchored to the truth. However it begins, spiritual growth still happens the same way it did in Wesley's day, through grace and honesty and courage. The church doesn't need passion, it needs people willing to build habits that outlast emotion. Holiness isn't instant, it's practiced. And when believers live that way, their faith becomes more than just words, it becomes witness. If this story of John Wesley's Methodist societies challenged or encouraged you, share it with someone who might really need some hope today. Make sure you go to thatsjesus.org for other Coach episodes and resources. And don't forget to follow and like and comment and review and subscribe and tune in for more Coach episodes every week. Every episode dives into a different corner of church history, but on Fridays, we stay between 1500 and 2000 AD. Thanks for listening to Coach, where church origins and church history actually coach us how to walk boldly with Jesus today. I'm Bob Balch with the That's Jesus channel. Have a great day and be blessed. With the royalties from this episode, I might be able to get enough coffee to start my own revival, one cup at a time.